Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chat with Fire, a casual podcast by folks in Wildland Fire for folks in Wildland Fire. I'm your host, Dana Lusk. Some of you also know me as the owner of Anchor and Flank Candles. It has been probably a couple of years since I've actually done these live chats with fire. So I'm really excited to be back. I have a few really awesome folks lined up for the next few months, and I'm just excited to jump back in. So today we have Mynda O's. She is a mental health practitioner specifically that works with folks that are first responders. She also has a pretty extensive background as a first responder herself, and she's married to a first responder. I think, is it one or two kids? Also,
one yeah, kid? My son. Yep.
Okay. Yep. And she is witty and just super funny and intelligent and caring and compassionate, and she's just an all-around awesome human. So I wanted to say, Mynda, thank you for joining me today. I'm super excited to have you on. And I don't really want to spoil anything too much. I'd rather you just hop on and jump in and tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm excited to be your first person back. I think that's fun. I think it's fun how we met, you taking some of my classes and us knowing mutual people in the industry. And so it's fire is that that the 7 degrees to Kevin Bacon. I feel like fire is like 2 degrees.
Yeah.
I swear you run into people and you're going to know the same people.
Yes.
It's just a small community.
I should have also added, yep, I did. I met Mynda, was it July of last year?
Yeah.
I think.
So.
Yep, for hospital and family liaison training. And then, you taught basic CISM back last month, which was
in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been, I really do love this community. I've been doing counseling for over 20 years, but the last 11 are exclusively with the first responders. I think because being a first responder, my husband just retired after 34 years. My son is one. And I actually started with Wildland with the Forest Service in 2014, responding out to the field all over the nation, actually, for critical incidents. And it was when they were just kind of starting to rebuild the CISM program. It wasn't, people weren't fond of it in 2014. It was kind of a hot mess.
Right.
And so the Forest Service and BLM just worked really hard at rebuilding that program, rebuilding the brand, rebuilding the reputation, making sure that peers were trained. And the biggest thing was the clinician. A lot of this stuff is about the clinician. And even if you go on your own, for your own personal therapy, having that clinician that has some sort of cultural competence, it really does matter if they get your field, your career, the culture. You don't have to explain as much. You can just kind of jump right in and they get it. They understand.
Yeah, it's like having an insider who understands firsthand what's going on. And I think, for a lot of people, we like to feel comfortable. We like to know that the other person has been through what we've been through. It's that common ground. And I think that's phenomenal, especially as far as CISM goes. We all know first responders are kind of like, you're on the outside, you can stay over there. So
they have really bad trust issues for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they, what they go through and their stress is unique to them. And so they, I think they appreciate and they can relax and those barriers can come down when you're sitting across from somebody who does get it and appreciates what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you go from working as a first responder yourself to making that transition into like the mental health side of things? Like, I know you talked a little bit at CISM, the CISM class, but
Yeah.
do you want to maybe talk on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I mean, so I was a first responder, got married, had kids, and decided to stay home with my kids because I was married to a first responder. And, if you're married to a first responder, their schedules are hectic. They're not around a lot. And so to raise kids in that environment, it's difficult. So we made the choice in our family for me to not work. And so he just worked lots of overtime and stuff like that so that I could stay home. And
Mhm.
then I went to school because I needed to like talk to adults. I needed,
I get that.
all right, I needed that dialogue and that back and forth. So I started to school with kind of no um, focus or goal, and then I decided I wanted to go into counseling. And what I actually started with when I graduated, which I really did enjoy, was kids and adolescents. That was my
Okay.
specialty for a long time
Mhm.
because I love them. They're really fun to work with. But I remembered, I started just remembering the struggles that I went through as a first responder because I still had those slides in my head that they
Okay.
just don't go away.
Right.
Um, Watching my husband kind of go through the career and his bad calls, I just felt the calling that our firefighters and our police do so much and sacrifice so much for us, the world, the community,
Mhm.
who's in the background helping them. And so that's really what drove me to get involved, was to support them. I knew that the PTSD, the suicide rates, the addiction were so high um, that they needed the help somewhere along the line so that they could finish out a career and retire
Yeah.
somewhat mentally healthy. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. Like I said, I think it goes back to kind of like bridging that gap of like you've been through it. And I think that probably equips you, I don't want to say better than, some random clinician, but having that background, it just serves you well. So hey, this is possibly what's going on. They might not talk about X, Y, Z, but maybe they're really dealing with this. So having that insight is just, I think it's priceless,
I think
honestly.
it helps. I just think it helps them feel more comfortable to share, especially after they've been through a traumatic event. Um, because that's the key is to sharing it, talking about it, getting it out of your head, so we can reduce the PTSD and the suicide rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how, like with CISM, you said back in 2014,
Hmm.
is that kind of when you jumped into CISM, like
Yeah.
from then on
Yeah.
to this right now?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I worked for a company, and it was really funny because my first call out was the freeze out fire, which was in I think it was oh no, it was in Idaho. The freeze out fire was in Idaho in 2014,
okay.
and I had just started, and the clinician actually had gotten in a car accident, and not bad, but wasn't able to show up, and so they asked me to go. I hadn't had the training. I mean, yes, I'm a psychologist, but it's different. CISM is different because it's not therapy. And
Mhm.
so I hadn't had the training yet, but they were like, "Can you go?" I went out into the field, and I absolutely loved it. And so I took the training. So just in case people don't know what CISM is, it's critical incident stress management. And it's when there's a critical incident, somebody gets injured on a fire, um, there's a line of duty death on a fire, or even we'll respond out to like off duty injuries and deaths and stuff. And so what the Forest Service and BLM, parks, even fish, they're all on board doing this also. And so are your
Mhm.
local municipals and police. They do it too. It just kind of may look a little different, but they put together a peer support team of peers and that have had training that are similar. So like if it were a hot shot that was involved, then they make sure there's a hot shot maybe in the peer support group, or if there's a dispatcher, we'll make sure we have a dispatcher in our peer support. And then me as the clinician, and we go out and we provide this service and these interventions to help people that witnessed it or were affected by it start their healing process so that, they're just not left out there kind of figuring out, what do I do with all of this?
Yep.
So that's kind of a nutshell of what CISM is.
And I can say, I mean, my journey with CISM, I think it was probably about two or three seasons ago. There were some incidents that happened on the forest where I was working, and my husband, at the time we weren't married, but there was an incident that he was involved in, and the dispatch center came and they said, well, hey, we have this CISM team, if you want to meet with them, go ahead, you're more than welcome to. And I was like, I don't really feel like I have a need. I mean, I'm good, I'm fine. But I remember in that moment also thinking, I might say, yeah, I'm fine right now, but it's not going to hurt by seeing what it's about. And being on that side of things, I think it's such a unique tool because, like you said, CISM it's peer support. So having peers, people who've been through either something similar or they've worked in the field that you're in, it was just very comforting to just go talk and be like, yeah, it was kind of a stressful day, or this one particular shift, XYZ happened. And oftentimes just feeling heard, that can take off such a load. And I remember walking out thinking, that is such a great tool, and I would really love to be more involved with that, and even attending the class for basic CISM. I don't know. I think it's really, really great work. I think it's very valuable, and I sincerely hope that should situations arise where that's offered, that people do lean into that resource instead of like, oh, I'm fine, I don't need this.
Yeah, I think it's getting better, but I think, like you said, you made a comment about, that when they asked if you wanted CISM, you were kind of like, no, I'm fine. And that's really common with anybody, not just first responders, but anybody after a traumatic incident or event. Like, your body is protecting you. So it's normal for you to kind of feel numb and in disbelief. And so that's why there's that window of when, peer support and CISM get to an incident. It should be, 24 to 48 hours, because you want to give people that opportunity to kind of go, wow, did this really happen? And so I think also the education, the preloading, people that are getting into the industry about what CISM is and peer support and the benefits of talking about bad stuff. I think that's why people are more open to it, where they weren't before. Everybody kind of resisted and argued, and I'm good. That tough guy kind of persona that they're trying to keep, because they think, if I'm bothered by this, what will my coworkers think? Will my coworkers think I can't do this job, or I'm not tough enough to do this job? But I think we all forget that I don't care what you do for a living, you're still human at the end of the day. And
Absolutely.
you're going to be affected by different things, right? What affects you may not affect me. But that's what is the beauty about talking to somebody, is that you kind of just get it off your chest. And, sometimes even hearing yourself speak out loud is healing, because even you can hear yourself and be like, that sounded different in my head.
Not all the time. Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure at some point, if somebody's either watching now or, tuning in later on for a recording, for somebody who's kind of like on the outskirts of, I don't know if I should do this or I shouldn't, what piece of advice, or like, what would you tell them? Like you were saying, if somebody's sitting there like, oh, I'm tough, I don't need to, talk about my feelings. How do you like invite them? Because I know we've talked about with CISM, like you're not going to force somebody, like you have to participate and talk about your feelings.
No, we don't force.
Yeah.
But what I tell people is this, or what I would suggest to people is that even if you don't feel like you're bothered right now, Like let's say you're involved in something. CISM team comes out and they want to talk to you and you feeling okay about it. I think about a couple things. One, maybe your coworkers or your crew are bothered and you're there for support. You're just providing support for them because you're saying basically, listen, you're bothered by it or you need to talk, so let me just sit down and be with you in this space. Or there's people that have that delayed response. And, if you're getting the information and then maybe a couple weeks, a month down the road, you're starting to think about that event now and you're now having some issues about that event, at least
Mhm.
you've now heard the information and like this is normal, or I'm not losing my mind, I'm not going crazy, that I remember when they came and talked to us, they said these things could happen. And so I think it's important, even for our first responders that like off duty or people that are not first responders, what can hurt to get information about how to better take care of yourself in stressful or critical situations?
Yeah, I think to me, it's all just knowledge in our back pocket, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, it might be several months later, or it could be a totally different incident where you're like, I remember this one thing that I heard. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to implement that in this situation, or I know somebody like my coworker's going through it. I can help them by passing it on.
Yeah.
I mean,
You can pass the information on. And I
yeah.
think too, what's good about, here's what I think is really good about CISM. Like I said, I'm a spouse of a first responder.
Mhm.
And so I think that these are what we teach in these groups or when we're talking to people one-on-one is how do you go home and talk to your spouse? Because this industry is very hard to stay married in.
Mhm.
The divorce rate is the highest for military, police, and fire. And that includes wildland. I mean, wildland is worse because of the time they're gone. They're gone the 14. It's so hard. They're gone 14 days. They get to rehab too. Some forests now have gone to 3,
Mhm.
but sometimes if there's a lot of bad things, they don't even let you go home to have your days off. They make you rehab or have your days off in camp or locally so they can pull you right back in. So there's a lot of time spent away from your families, and there's a breakdown in communication from between you and your spouses or your family or kids.
Yeah.
And so in these groups, we talk about how do you talk to your family? How do you stay in contact with your significant others and let them know I've just been through this event? How do you do that? And so that's what these groups are good for also is we touch on those things and we talk about how do we stay connected to our families.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that really impressed me too with the training. Um, Again, basic CISM is like there's so much care and compassion beyond the here and the now. It's like, okay, here's the situation. There's a traumatic event, a death on the line, an injury. Obviously, that's going to be approached like in the work community, but how that ripples into other areas of life, like that does need to be addressed. And
Yeah.
I'm really happy to know. I mean, that's part of this whole thing is, hey, we don't want you to just leave and then have complete chaos at home. We want you to understand, you know, these are things that might happen, or this is how you can communicate and get through it.
Well, and I think too that a lot of agencies, the Forest Service, included, are really pushing more to take care of the mental health of their employees.
Mhm.
And, a lot of, I hear it all the time, a lot of people, they're angry or they're frustrated about something about their organization, right? No organization is perfect, none.
Right.
But the one thing I can say is that doing this for 11 years, I have seen the push. I have seen the push in the Federal Wildland Agency to push mental health. Do they have it right 100%? No. I don't know that we'll ever get it 100% right, but are they trying and do they work at providing that support? They do. I mean, there's
Mhm.
even sometimes calls they send me to, I'm kind of like, was this really a CISM call? But then I think, hey, better safe than sorry. At least they are pushing this out to take care of the people. And that's, I think these agencies are getting it, that if we don't take care of our people, they're not good employees and
Mm,
they don't stay. So we have to take care of them, and we have to help them take care of their families so they'll stay.
yeah, I think that's, yeah, yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Um, can you see the comments?
I do. I just see the one right now.
Okay, yeah. Hi, Danny,
Yes.
and we got a couple other folks on. James, he says it's hard to open up at home because sometimes it may be received as just another story from the line.
Right. So, I hear that a lot, or I hear that some people are saying, well, I don't want to burden my spouse. And here's my tip is that maybe you just, instead of telling the whole story, because I know that I got burnt out with my husband's stories, right? Sometimes it's repetitive or it's the same thing. And because I'm not in it, I kind of was like, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm missing the plot of the story. And so I would suggest for James or anybody, it's more about kind of getting to the basics of the story. Instead of telling the whole line, is the whole story about out on the line, is maybe saying, it was such a ridiculous, stressful day. We just had a lot of training, or it was sketchy out there. We got close to the fire, or it was very physically draining. We had to cut line all day. I'm just, every part of my body hurts. But really getting to the point about this story, what is it for you that is bothering you?
Hmm. I know in the situation that I referred to earlier, when my husband was in the incident, it was almost a near burn over is kind of
Mhm.
what ended up happening. And the story that I got was, oh yeah, we were out, we were just doing our job, and then all of a sudden, like things got a little squirrely, but everything worked out okay. Like I heard from somebody else completely, like, oh yeah, it was more than a hairy
Mhm.
situation. And I think for a lot of first responders, it can be just another story from the line, or
Right.
you can cover it up with like, yeah, it just got really scary or hairy or whatever. Um, but I also feel like it's kind of weird for me because I feel like I've been on both sides of the
Yeah.
story.
Mhm.
In that role of the spouse that's not out there on the line, it kind of makes me like, okay, well, I guess he's good. Like he said he was fine.
And I think too
So,
that, a lot of our first responders, I talk about work brain, home brain, right?
mhm,
Work
absolutely.
brain, right? Work brain is adrenaline filled, it's operational, it's task oriented, and it's unemotional. And so
Yep.
when you're in work brain, you shut off those emotions and set them aside. And so I think for our first responders and our wildland firefighters is they just get in work mode. And
Hmm.
it's just like head down, focused, and you're trying to get the task at hand done. And I think a lot of our first responders take that home sometimes. And they, especially if you're only home 2 or 3 days, I think you stay in work brain, you stay unattached from your emotions, and you just put your head down and you push through like you would on the line,
Hmm.
because that's what's expected out of you. And so I think that there, is that feeling of just this numbness and going through the motions.
Right.
And we have to work at fighting that. And I think when you understand your body's doing that, you can be aware, hey, I just got home, day one, first 24 hours, you're
Hmm.
still going to kind of be in work brain and numb to it. But I think when we educate our family and we set up those guidelines and you ask your spouse, what do you want to know? Right? Because not every spouse wants to know all of it.
Hmm.
What do you want to know?
Right. Right.
And then the spouse can ask, well, what do you want to talk about? Sometimes when they walk in the door, they absolutely don't want to talk about work. They're like, that's the last thing I want to do.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I hear wildland firefighters tell me this all the time, that they are more stressed about going home than staying at work, because at work they know what's expected out of them.
Yeah.
There's no emotions. They have a job to do, they have a checklist, and it's just kind of easy. You can go autopilot and do it.
Yeah.
When you come home, there's more expectations, and it just sometimes feels really overwhelming to our firefighters when they're exhausted, and now you've got kids like, I want to tell you about my day. Or, like one of the mistakes I made as a fire wife was when my husband came through the door is I wanted to fill him in on all the details. And, he's been gone for like 24, 72 hours, however long.
Yeah.
And I want to tell him all the details, which takes a really long time. His brain is literally like, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Get to the plot, get to what you need from me, because they're still,
Potatoes.
yes,
Yeah.
meat
Yeah.
and potatoes. They don't want all the fluff.
Yeah.
And I feel so bad for our first responders a lot of the times because they're excited to be home. They've missed being home, but they don't know what's going on in their bodies and their minds and feeling so overwhelmed. And now they think I'm just irritated to be home, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's just that work brain and trying to switch and figure how to switch.
Yeah.
And part of like CISM and mental health, and even not even CISM, getting your own clinician as a first responder is going to help. We're going to walk you through and talk you through how do you do that transition? How do you take care of yourself so you're a better version when you do get home?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and James said it too, like becoming numb to, whatever's happening on the job or,
Life.
it's,
Sometimes just life.
yeah. And I know, I mean, we've been together for about 4 years now. Like when my husband gets home, sometimes I just know, like, okay, I need to give him some space. Let him, like, he's a TV guy. Like,
Yeah.
let him chill out, watch some shows, like unwind, where he doesn't have to think. Hey, sorry, little
Dog.
little dog,
Well,
little
and
dog.
that's the other thing. Part of that interview part, I'll let you finish, but part of that interview part is setting up what do I need when I walk in the door?
Mhm.
Because what we're doing is we're expecting each other to mind read and kind of guess. And so you have to set it up as the first responder or firefighter. You have to set it up and be like, listen, I need 30 minutes of
Mhm.
like no contact. Like let
Yeah,
me let me go shower, let me work out. Like I just need this to like unwind, disconnect, and start to integrate back into home.
totally,
But if you're not sharing
totally.
that, your spouse or family, they don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember, I don't know, this was a handful of years ago. I was back home in Alaska dispatching for the summer, and we had some days that it was, 12, 13 days, 13-hour days, whatever. I was staying with my folks for the summer, and I would get home. I'm mentally shot. I don't want to talk about work. Like, I just want to go to bed. And, my mom, she and I were very close, but she'd be like, well, how was work? And what did you do? And I went to the grocery store today and I saw Bobby and Sue and these people and I did this. And then I spilled my coffee this morning. And I'm like, Mom, I literally need like half an hour because you're
Yeah.
speaking Greek to me right now. I can't comprehend. And that's something that I had to learn to voice as well.
Yeah.
Like, these are my needs and those need to be met. Otherwise, it's not going to go well.
Well, and what happens is you end up looking like the jerk, right? Because if you don't state what your needs are, then what happens is you try to force it, and then what happens is you snap, or you're irritable, or annoyed, or you don't have patience. And so when you set that boundary up and let the family know what you need, then they can receive you better. And they're just not like, why are you grumpy when you come home?
Right.
Why are you always grumpy? Are you not happy to be home?
Yeah.
No, I'm happy to be home, but I feel overstimulated. I'm overwhelmed, and my brain cannot take any more.
Right.
But they have to advocate for themselves and they have to let their spouse know, not when you're irritated, right? Not when
Right.
you walk in the door. That's not the time to set those boundaries up. You have to set them up beforehand when you're not in a bad mood or already overstimulated. You just have to say, listen, this is
Yeah.
what I need. I just need a minute to unwind, or I need to work out, whatever that is, so that your family is prepared.
Yeah. I think it's important too to establish, hey, I'm not saying this or asking for this 30-minute buffer. I'm not doing that to be rude. It's really for the betterment of all of us, for the
Yeah.
family situation, for our relationship, whatever. And I almost feel like in our society, we've kind of painted alone time or self-care as like, oh, that's bad, you're being greedy or whatnot. And it's like, no, like we all need that little buffer
Well,
for
I
our
think though, but for
company,
our, what happens though for our first responders is this: they've been gone so long, so they do feel guilty for asking for more time because
So,
they've missed out, right? So now they finally get home and now they feel bad about asking for this time because, like, in my situation, I was a stay-home mom. I was with the kids all the time.
right.
And so when he would walk in the door, my expectation was is that he's going to take these kids off my hands because I'm
Um,
over them. I'm so over
over
them.
the dog.
I need a
Yeah.
break. And so then he feels guilty to say out loud, but I really do need some time to decompress before I engage. And so, guess what? He doesn't say anything, he keeps his mouth shut, and then he forces it. And by lunchtime, we're in a fight because he's so overstimulated and overwhelmed and feels guilty. And now we're in a fight, and I don't know why we're in a fight.
Right.
I just assume it's me when it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that kind of goes like with James that just said, as a first responder, we also lose focus on our spouses, like needing that as well, dealing with holding down the fort.
Yeah,
Valid.
absolutely. And you know what? I will tell you the one thing that I appreciate because I gave up a career in the front half of our marriage, and we talked about it,
Mm-hmm.
so that he could do his thing, I could be with the kids and stuff like that. And one thing we used to do is compete. We'd have like competition arguments, like who was more tired, who worked harder, right? You know, like he would be like, I was up all night. And I was like, well, I was up all night with sick kids. And he would be like, well, yeah, but you got to sleep in your own bed. And I'm like, yeah, but I was up all night, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what we had to realize as a first responder couple was both of our jobs were important for the mission of our family. And we both were needed. We both represented different things, but we both were like participating and pulling our weight. It just looked different. And one of the things I tell our first responders, like, that goes so far that I really appreciated was when my husband would just acknowledge that,
Mm-hmm.
like, thank you for the sacrifice, thank you for holding down the fort, thank
Right.
you for supporting me so that I can be out there living my best life.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes so far.
I agree with that because I know last year, with us having just got married and then we moved across the country and then just life happened, I stayed home and worked my business and cleaned the house and did dinner and, was like all of a sudden thrust into this homemaker life instead of going out on dispatch assignments. And I definitely hit that point of like, I'm not doing anything worthwhile. Like I'm just the stay at home. I don't do anything, anything big. And what we had to sit down and talk about was like it takes all kinds of work,
Mm-hmm.
and one is not necessarily more valuable than the other because it takes different kinds to get the job done,
Yep.
and especially I think as far as like family cohesion goes, you need all of those bases covered. Everybody's got something to offer,
Yeah. And it's just the biggest issue is also, it takes a village, right? It's not just a one man job to raise a family, to keep a house, to have a career, unless you're totally single.
right?
If you don't want the picket fence and the kids, that's cool. You don't have to have that. But if you do want those things, and then it requires teamwork. And as spouses, we know what we sign up for, right? It's not like we don't know what we sign up for. We know it's going to be rough, and we're going to be frustrated, and we might get irritated with you sometimes because you're not around. But it's about just, I guess, recognizing and being thankful. I'm telling you, being thankful goes so far.
It is huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Danny says, it definitely is a support system, and we can't do this alone. And I think as spouses, if there's any spouses that are going to listen to this, knowing like you're not in this alone, there's other spouses. Sorry, my phone was about to die.
There.
There's other spouses that get it. There's clinicians that you can go and talk to. There's all kinds of things out there, but trying to do this alone, even as our first responders, and that's why CISM is so valuable, is you're not out there doing it alone. You're we're showing up to support you and say, hey, we get it that this is going to, have an impact, and we're here to support you.
Yeah, 100%. I know Danny and I have talked about, like she said, it takes a village. And that, I think it's important too to remember that that can be multiple villages. It can be first responder spouses getting together and supporting themselves. It can be your coworkers. It can be, like you said, the clinician or the CISM team. Whatever, to me, whatever is like most beneficial for the individual, lean into that. Like,
Yeah.
It's going to look different for everybody, and that's totally okay.
Even like some people are religious, then they lean into their religion or their spirituality.
Right.
We're multidimensional as humans, and we can't think that there's going to be one thing that fixes it all. It's multiple things.
I feel like if there was one thing, we would all have like sunshine and rainbows all
Right?
the time.
Yeah. And life would be so awesome.
It would be.
But I'd be out of a job.
I mean, that would be great for you, but you could find something else. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, it is about figuring that out, and having the support system and the self-care and the career that you love and following your dreams. It's just, it is a lot. And for our first responders, like probably hearing all that may be so overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, how do I juggle all of this? You're adding more like stimuli to my brain, how do I make everybody happy? And you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
If you make you happy, it just kind of oozes out, and then the people around you feel happy, because if you're happy with you, then the way you treat people and you go about your daily life it'll work, and people will be attracted to you, and people will feel good around you.
Mm-hmm. I think we've probably all met those people that I don't know, I'm trying to think of the polite way to say this, but they're difficult to deal with, especially, in the first responder world. You're like, man, this guy or girl is super grouchy, not pleasant to be around.
Negativity. Negativity.
Yeah, negativity. And I had a coworker like that years ago. And after he retired, totally different person. Like, he's super peppy, he's happy. I was like, are you okay? Like, you're smiling.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, gratitude, being thankful, that goes a really long way. I know for myself, I started journaling recently. And it sounds cliche or silly, but literally just writing down every single day, like, this is what I'm thankful for. It's, I would say, like, in a way, like rewiring the brain, because you're not focusing on all of those bad things.
Yeah. Well, have you heard, there's lots of resiliency training, right? That's like kind of the new catchy word, is resiliency training. But really, in a nutshell, what resiliency is about mindset. And the people who tend to be more positive or optimistic do better than people that are negative or pessimistic. And the more negative people usually take the world, the things that happen, and they internalize it, and then believe that the world is picking on them, that they're being chosen, and they just can't catch a break. And that's just not how life is. I mean, life happens to all of us, and it's what you do with it that determines what kind of person you are. And the people that are able to see that maybe this is a learning opportunity, or maybe this means I need to make some changes in my life. Or you just realize, like, shit happens to
Yeah.
good people, to bad people. Life doesn't seek out certain individuals and make their life worse than someone else's. And it's just all what we do with it and how we bounce back from it, really.
Mm-hmm. I heard something a while back. I don't quote me on this, but the gist of it, the gist of it was like, if you go around thinking, oh, all these bad things happen to me, the world is out to get me, everyone is out to get me, doom and gloom. It's like, what makes you think that you're the center of the universe, that all that revolves around you?
I know.
It's a lot of it is really like what you put out, you will get back.
100%. It's the energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? So attitude in, attitude out. And if you have a negative perspective or a negative attitude or a victim attitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that's what you're going to project out. And then that's what you're going to attract,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you're not going to attract positive, good people and good things, I call it the Eeyore syndrome, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
woe
Yeah.
is me. I never can catch a break.
Yeah.
And, the technical term for like clinicians is, PTS growth,
Oh.
where you can go through a traumatic event and actually come out stronger and a better human being.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I always wonder on the news when you see like these moms that have lost their children and then they create new laws or they go to like
Mm-hmm.
legislation and they create these bills because they've decided this isn't going to break
Right.
me. They find something inside of them to do good
Mm-hmm.
instead of be so negative, or why my child, or what did I do to deserve this?
Mm-hmm.
None of us deserve anything bad. It's just life.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yeah. I mean, I I can speak to that just with, last year we lost our first and only pregnancy, and it was several months of like kind of the internal doom and gloom of,
Mhm.
why did this happen? This is horrible. I don't like this. And it took a lot of like reflecting and growth, but I got to the point where I was like, there's something to come from this, like
Mhm.
being able to speak with other people about their situation or like help other people through losing a pregnancy. It really is a matter of like, okay, am I going to sit here and continue to be all doom and gloom, be Eeyore, or, do I accept it and grow and
Pick,
like make
pick
it
yourself up.
better? Yeah,
Pick yourself
exactly.
up because all of us have been knocked down.
Yeah.
All of us have been laying on the floor, sobbing,
Mm-hmm.
thinking this is it, that I can't recover from this.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's okay to be on the floor sobbing or feel broken. I just tell people you can visit, just don't unpack. Don't live there.
Yeah.
It's just a waste. We don't get to redo this life. We don't get to go back and say, oh, I wish I would have done this. Let me go back and fix it. And, all of us have been through stuff, some more than others. It's just what hand you were dealt.
Yeah.
It's what you do with the hand. And that's the biggest thing for me working with this population, why it's so important because they do see bad stuff on a regular basis. They are under extreme amount of pressure. And, my goal is to help see that there's some hope for them to still have a mentally healthy life and not be, you know, doom and gloom all the time.
Yeah. I have a friend that says thinking. That's her phrase, where she knows if I get in that head funk where I'm just replaying or doing the poor me, I catch myself and say, okay, I'm stinking thinking, and I need to like flip that and
Mm.
get on that positive trajectory just to, to keep going. Like you said, like don't unpack. You can go back and visit.
Visit.
Yeah.
Just visit.
Yeah.
Just don't
Don't
stay there.
don't live there. Yeah. Um, hmm. I want to keep an eye on our time too here. So we are coming up on an hour. I don't think we have too many people that are tuned in live, but if anybody has questions, and wants to go ahead and add them in, please feel free. I don't know, Mynda, is there anything that you want to like leave off with?
No, I just, I think this is awesome that you're getting back to this. And I think that any podcast or anything that anybody in this industry can do to help support others is a win.
Mhm.
And just, keeping the dialogue going and normalizing that this industry does damage people, but there's a way back from it, and there's a way to heal, and there's a way to live, a healthier, sustainable life and still do it, and not have to give it up.
Yeah, I think it's really important to just to like recognize there's progress being made.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I think it was Dale at the CISM class that, he was talking about how much the program has progressed through the years. And I just think that, I mean, if people could come that far in, I don't know, say 15, 20 years, what's it going to be like in the next 15 or 20? Right.
And it's getting better. I mean, and I know the feds are it's a slow process. They don't do anything quick. But like I said, my journey started in 2014, and it is getting better, and we're getting more clinicians that get it, and it's just evolving. And I hope people, if my message, I guess, would be for any first responders or spouses that might be listening, talk, communicate, use the resources. If you're on an incident and CISM is coming, don't be closed-minded to it completely. You don't have to talk, and no one's going to put you on blast. You could just sit in the group, or sit and listen. But it's very beneficial to get that support. It'll help you go home and talk to your spouses, and explain kind of what happened. But keeping that communication open it's the only way we can move forward as a society.
Yeah. And also recognizing that, especially like for CISM, that's a safe place.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, Jim said XYZ, I'm going to go tell other people. It's kind of sacred in a way.
It's confidential. I mean, I'm governed by a license to, I don't go back and tell leadership, oh, guess who said this or that, we keep it very confidential, and we don't share anything.
Yeah.
So
that's a special thing.
Yeah.
You're doing wonderful work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're back on here and gonna, keep reaching out and helping the community. It's good stuff.
Yeah. I think we live in such a small world. Fire is especially a small world. So
yeah,
just a good way to get people connected, networking, hearing other stories. And again, knowing that people aren't alone.
Yeah.
We're all here for each other.
It's a support system.
Absolutely. Well, with all that said, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so glad this worked out.
I know. I'm excited. I'm glad that it did work out too. I know we had a little bit of a snafu, but we got it.
Right. I mean, it's to be expected.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mynda, and to everybody else that tuned in, thank you as well. I will work on either today or tomorrow getting this all figured out, like the recording, put it on streaming platforms, whatnot. So we'll be good to go.
Okay.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you very much. I hope you all have a great day.
Bye.
All right. Bye.